said, well, after the breakfast rush, and so that's my guess.
Why it's 11-1. So, well, hopefully, yeah. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the potatoes in their burrito, but the cheese is a non-starter.
See, my problem is the potatoes and the salsa in the burrito.
Oh, well.
Michael likes the potatoes.
Yeah.
But I'm like, bacon and egg burritos are bacon and eggs. And I can deal with cheese, but I just really prefer bacon and eggs.
Yeah, see, you're anti-cheese too, and you make me look like a bad guy.
No, I eat cheese on everything else. It's just, when I was little, Mom would make bacon and egg burrito. My kids will still be like,
yeah,
you can have that for dinner.
I know.
Get excited about bacon and egg burritos for dinner.
That's the Yahoos too. So.
God, yesterday we were supposed to have hamburger, and I decided on the way home I didn't want hamburger, and I realized we had everything for tacos. We'll just make tacos. And then I decided I was gonna even fry enough tortillas. I was even gonna fry up chips. Oh my God, Katie and Michael were in heaven. They were so excited.
You got 5 stars last night then.
Oh yeah, I was the mom who was like the best ever.
So hopefully, it's funny. Yeah. Anyway, hopefully they don't have anything in there, but you never know. So.
Okay.
Anyway.
Maybe I should go ask Gene if he's going to do a survey.
That's funny. Well, and you can always, if you want to, you can just call or text when you get down there what they have in there.
Okay.
So.
All right. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. That's messed up.
Turn your camera off. You kick her out.
I can stop her video like that, though. Ooh, look at that. There'll be no bullying. There'll be no bullying on my watch, even for the people that don't like cheese. What's all this about?
Yeah, she's very picky. So she has, that's an argument.
Mr. Grant.
Yes.
I had a question. Can we talk after class about the assignments that I'm missing?
Sure.
All right.
No CJ? No Norella, no Orsay? Good Wednesday to you. So we will go over how we can tell what it goes on with price in terms of what we have with supply and demand in the market. That is the biggest thing from yesterday. And then we'll look at how price acts as a signal. So today we'll look at how price acts as a signal, what that can tell us, the positives and negatives to that, and then how the government will control that so that groups are not disadvantaged, whether it be consumers or businesses, in terms of what happens within the market. All right, so yesterday, what we did was take a look at basically how we put everything together. So 2 units ago, we looked at demand. This was unit 4, with price and quantity demanded, and we only looked at it from the point of view of consumers. Last week in unit 5, we looked at it from the point of view of businesses, so that was supply. And then yesterday, we put both of them together and created a market curve. So we have price here now, we have quantity down here, we have demand here, we have supply here. Now, a couple of things, and it doesn't matter if you get a service with this, a couple of things are always going to be constant. Price is always going to be on the y-axis. Quantity is always going to be on the x-axis. Demand is always going to slope down. Supply is always going to slope up because of the law of supply and the law of demand tell us that. Then what we have here, and this is the same, this is always going to be equilibrium. The only point of equilibrium is where supply and demand are equal to each other, and that's only at one point. Everything else is out of equilibrium, or disequilibrium as it's called. So if you come straight down to the x-axis, this is your equilibrium quantity. That is the quantity at which supply and demand are equal. If you come over to the y-axis, this is equilibrium price. This is the price at which supply and demand are equal. So that will be consistent no matter the good or service. Doesn't matter what the numbers are. That's what you'll have when you look at different scenarios. And then we know from yesterday that we have simple truths on this market curve. The biggest one from yesterday is that price, right, always is going to equilibrium. The force of price is always going to equilibrium. It's always forcing it to come together. And so there were a couple of items, and we looked at this yesterday, but basically in a market, and we see this with day-to-day examples, and we'll use them again, but in a market, we can tell some things. If supply or demand stay the same, what is going to happen in terms of price? And this was the important part from yesterday. So we have demand here, we have supply here, and let's say in the first set of examples that supply stayed the same. So we have, back to my point here. Okay. We have equilibrium here. This is equilibrium price. And let's say that we have a change in demand. So iPhones come out usually every September, the new version. Let's say that that happens and the demand for iPhones increases. We would have new demand represented by D1. And what that does is create a new equilibrium price. So that would be EP1. And we know this is true because this is the origin and price increases, right, from that distance. So when we look at demand decreasing, that would be U2. We would have a new equilibrium. We would have a new equilibrium price. Closer to zero decreases. So what we know is true if supply stays the same, if demand increases, and this makes sense, right? Demand increases, we know that the price of the product is going to go up, represented by D1 there. If demand decreases, and this makes sense, right? We know the price of the product is going to go down. People are going to try to sell those products. And then the second portion of what we did yesterday was this. So if, right, we look at it from a point of demand staying the same, we have a demand curve here, we'll label that B. We have a supply curve here, we'll label that S. This point right here is equilibrium. This is equilibrium price. And again, this will make sense when we draw this out and put words to it. But let's say demand stays the same and supply increases. We have S1 here. That means we have a new equilibrium point, which is going to be right there. Equilibrium price has dropped. We know that because it's gotten closer to the origin, right? And so then we know this is true, right? If demand stays the same and supply increases, right? If demand stays the same, supply increases, the price of the product is going to go down. There's too much. And that makes sense. Then if, right, demand stays the same and supply decreases, we have S2 here. We have a new equilibrium. We'll label that E2. And then this is the new equilibrium price, which would be E2. Farther away from the origin. So then that means here, supply decreases, demand stays the same, price goes up. And we see that all the time, right? We see that all the time. Things become very, very popular. The supply gets smaller and smaller. The value of what's left over increases and increases. Questions on that one? Okay. So then, as I said, today what we'll look at is going to be how prices act as signals. So in your module 16, you can go ahead and click on the role of prices. Should be below the supply and demand case study 1. And we'll talk about the role of prices and what it does for our economic system, advantages and disadvantages of that. We'll talk about government setting minimum and maximum prices and why they do that. We will look at what you need to know for the Unit 6 test. We'll look at the rankings in the stock market with 3 days left in our competition. And then the supply and demand case study 2, or demand and supply case study 2. You should have time to finish in the class. And then all you have between now and next Monday is Unit 6 test. So quickly, when we talk about the role of prices, right? Prices act as, let's go back. Prices act as a signal. Generally, when the prices go up, we know that various things are happening within the economic system. It's the same thing when prices go down. So one of the examples that we use, just because it's very easy to look at and see what's going on, is gasoline. And so prices are going to act as a signal, and they're going to tell us what is going on in the economic system. That is one of the advantages to us having a free market system. So if we take a look at gasoline, right? Gasoline over the last 2 months started out at about $3.99, then it went to $4.09, $4.19, $4.29. It's at right now. That is a steady climb up, right? Steady climb up. And so one of the things that we realize, right, when we examine this, the price of gasoline is going up. Is it because of the demand for gasoline, or is it because of the supply of gasoline? So you've got two factors, right? If we're talking about the supply of gasoline, is enough gasoline in the market? Are the refineries basically creating enough gasoline and is getting shipped? Well, basically, except for late February, early March, right, the supply of gasoline is relatively the same. So if we know that that is relatively the same, then it's got to be the demand. So price of gasoline going up tells us the demand is increasing, right? Because if supply stays the same, right, on this graph, if supply stays the same, how do prices of gasoline go up? And as I said, it acts as a signal, right? If this is the original equilibrium price, demand has to move to the right, right? And we know that it is going because that is the only way, right, to get it to a new equilibrium price. So demand must be going up. And it's going up because things are opening up, more and more people are getting vaccinated, more and more people want to travel. So the role of prices in our economic system, the biggest thing is that it acts as basically a barometer of what's going on, measurement of what is happening within the market. So there's advantages to that. Advantages here in terms of role of prices in our market. This is for the free market. Prices act as an incentive. You can put things on sale and people will look at buying those things. As I said, prices act as a signal. That's probably the biggest advantage. Prices give flexibility. You can be flexible in what you price and how you price it to get them to a certain point. Pricing system in a market system is free. It does not cost in our market system to set prices of goods and services. It gives us a wide choice of goods. If you've gone to any other country, even though there are countries that are similar in terms of economic system, maybe even have some democratic freedom, the variety of products that you have are generally numerous here compared to other places. It allows for an efficient allocation of resources because people don't want to waste resources because they're trying to make as much money as possible. Now, there are disadvantages to having a market system in which prices are so free moving. One is supply shock, and we've talked about this before. So when we look at this, we've talked about the freeze in Texas at the end of February and March, right? So at the end of the second and beginning of the third month, we had a supply shock. A freeze basically stopped the flow of electricity through power plants to those customers in Texas. That supply shock, where the supply plummeted, right, 70% or more in some places, drove prices up hundreds of percent. People in March ended up with a $16,000 electrical bill in some instances. So that's a huge disadvantage to our market system. There are a number of states that don't allow that to happen. So a number of states, depending upon where you live, will set the kilowatt hour, right, at a specific maximum price or minimum price. They'll set a minimum price to guarantee the electric companies can make a profit, but they'll sell a maximum price so that something like this, where in some instances it was 1,000% higher the month of March than it was in January, or compared to the last year. So that's a disadvantage. Rationing, dividing up a good or service without regard to price. People did this in those situations. People do this in hurricanes. They'll go to the store and they'll buy up a bunch of things and then keep it for themselves. And we saw that last year. The black market is a bunch of illegal things that can take place in our economic system, right? Drugs. One of the big ones now is what? What's selling online that everybody wants to buy? Well, but illegal. Cryptocurrency, yeah, was big yesterday. It went up like 40% on some of them. What do they want to buy? What do you need to travel? A negative test or a vaccine card, right? If you go online, you go into Google and you type in vaccine card, right? You'll come up with a bunch of black market fake vaccine cards. Crazy, right? Imperfect competition. You've had monopolies before, right? J.D. Rockefeller. We talked about that probably in U.S. history in terms of monopolies. That's why we have the Federal Trade Commission. They generally set up and make sure that any sort of merger between businesses is legal, doesn't create a monopoly. And then you have spillover costs, right? Unforeseen costs of production. So one of the things right along Bradley here with them putting the utilities below ground, there has been spillover costs in terms of traffic, the amount of time that it takes people, and those things were unforeseen as big as it has been. Questions on that one? So, let's look at
I'm Jacob Clifford, and this is Crash Course Economics. Today we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. Everything from luxury planned economy to heartless free market, from price gougers to indolent apparatchiks. But it's not all bad. Everyone that price signals and cheap skinny jeans are on the way out. Difference between free market economies, where supply and demand determine what gets produced, and centrally planned economies, where government agencies decide what gets produced. Today, we're going to expand on that and discuss why competitive markets have been more successful at providing most of the things people want. Central planning has some upside. Everyone who wants a job has a job, and production aims to be an idealized version of society's collective goals. But the reality of it has been less ideal for consumers in those societies. In the Soviet Union, central planners were focused on producing heavy equipment and military hardware. There were shortages of consumer goods like soap, sugar, and electronics. It turns out people like having smartphones and good coffee more than they care about tractors. And so countries like China and Cuba have moved away from large-scale central planning. The problem with central planning is that it's inefficient. And when economists talk about efficiency, they're talking about a couple different types of efficiency that's different than the efficiency that you might know. The first is productive efficiency, the idea that products are being made at the lowest possible cost. This means that there are no wasted resources, that raw materials, workers, machines are being used to their full potential. Central planners in general aren't that focused on cost. In the free market, an individual business owner has an incentive not to be wasteful because they want to maximize profit. In the words of Milton Friedman, nobody spends somebody else's money as carefully as he spends his own. The second type of efficiency is called allocated efficiency. This means that the things we're producing are the things that consumers actually want. In other words, our scarce resources are being allocated towards the things we value. Let's say a company is producing only skinny jeans. Now, if they're not hiring too many workers, if they're not ending up with a bunch of extra materials, they're producing at the lowest possible cost, and that's productively efficient. The problem is they only make skinny jeans. Even though the company might be productively efficient, they're probably not allocatively efficient. Consumers don't want only skinny jeans, some want boot cuts. Central planners are less likely to be allocatively efficient because they have a harder time getting feedback on what people want. Free market producers of consumer goods collect a lot of data about consumer preferences from stuff like market research. But they can also learn a lot about consumers' wants by looking at prices. Like, what are these price signals? Let's go to the problem. Okay, if people are paying high prices for skinny jeans, it tells producers that society wants more skinny jeans. Start making them. If no one wants skinny jeans, producers make something else instead. jump to the market. Pricing not only tells producers what to do, but they also help distribute tablets to people that value them the most. For example, if someone's brand doesn't want one tablet and she was only willing to pay $3 for one, she couldn't get it. Another brand is a driver into the 21st century by using her own prescription. Some economists love pricing so much that they argue against the tradition of giving gifts. This argument was popularized by economist Bill Walpole, who argued that gift giving is inefficient. From a macroeconomic point of view, holiday shopping boosts consumer spending, GDP, and employment. But if too many people are purchasing items that only consumers don't value, then resources are being wasted. Of course, this analysis doesn't factor in other implicit benefits of giving, like fostering love and affection with family and friends. But the fact remains, the ideal gift in terms of efficiency is cash. Thanks, Pablo. Theoretically, in a free market, producers cannot make themselves better off without making consumers better off. If a company makes too many units of a product or does undesirable stuff, they'll have to adapt quickly or else they'll go out of business. Competition between businesses keeps prices and quality up. This is our old buddy Adam Smith's invisible hand. It's important to take a step back and point out that we're not saying that free markets are always good and the company's involvement is always bad. Most economists recognize that markets aren't perfect and they often fail to meet society's needs. In these cases, economists encourage the government to either regulate or take direct control of markets to improve social welfare. In the United States, which is often mistaken for a free market economy, it turns out just about everything is regulated. For example, FDA regulations reject any meat that contains 9 milligrams or more rodent-free pellets and/or pellet fragments. And the government directly controls the markets for national defense and public education. The field of public economics analyzes this very thing. Now, unlike rodent excrement and public education as much as an expert, but let's get back to markets and the role that prices play in determining how we use our limited resources. So, price signals help us use our resources efficiently, but that doesn't mean that everyone agrees that they're always right or just. Take price gouging. Price gouging happens when sellers raise prices for essential items like food, water, and gasoline. There's something like an emergency. Some argue that this practice exploits consumers. As an example of the cruelty of markets, in the U.S., anti-price gouging laws have been enacted in 34 states. But many economists say that these laws promote inefficiency and actually make the problem worse. They argue that allowing prices to increase in times of crisis encourages others outside the sector to home and sell essential goods. See, prices aren't allowed to increase, and there's less than to bring stuff in. Furthermore, higher prices like batteries, saving knives, and generators mean that people who don't really need them won't buy them. They will be able to people who do. Now, it might not always be government laws that limit price gouging. It may be the desire to earn profit that actually keeps prices down. It's clear that businesses can earn a ton of profit in the short run by price gouging, but what happens in the long run? Consumers are likely to remember how they were treated. This is part of the reason some businesses like Walmart has an emergency operations center and in-house meteorologists to interpret weather patterns. This allows them to have goods like water and batteries in stock when needed. Not only is this profitable, it's also a pretty good public relations move. In fact, in some cases like Hurricane Katrina in 2005, private businesses were quicker to provide disaster relief than government agencies. A different example of how the price system is perceived as unjust is below-cost pricing, sometimes called predatory pricing. This is the idea that a business can drive out competitors by charging lower prices even at short-term loss. Competitors that can't sustain such low prices will be pushed out of the market, giving the surviving businesses market share and the ability to raise prices. Let's talk about Walmart a bit. Walmart has been the target of numerous predatory pricing disputes. Their size allows them to squeeze distributors and sell products at very low prices. While it's often consumer like these low prices, it's bad for competitors, especially small mom and pop stores, who are sometimes pushed out of the market. But is it predatory pricing? In the US, of course it's not. The Federal Trade Commission website states, although the FTC examines claims of predatory pricing carefully, courts including the Supreme Court have been skeptical of such claims. So predatory pricing lawsuits are common, but business successfully eliminates their competitors by selling products at a loss, they're eventually going to increase their prices above the market price and unavoidable. In the short run, consumers will have to pay for it, but eventually other businesses will be attracted by the higher prices and in the market. The end result is that there's no guarantee that predatory pricing will work in the long run.
If you read inequality disregard the environment, you will under environment group, and they are. Exploitation will be an issue. Now, there are some examples of somebody who causes nothing.
The whole world's not evil. Just parts of it. All right. So, a couple of things. One, when we look at prices, and those are sort of the advantages and disadvantages of prices that we have looked at throughout. But one of the things that the government does do to try to even out different situations are price floors and price ceilings. And so one of the things that the government will do is it will block the market system from working naturally. And so the government intervention in the market system happens one of two ways. They'll set a maximum price and they'll set a minimum price. Advantages and disadvantages to each. Certain groups are going to be protected and benefit from that. Others are not going to be. But when you look at this here, right, sometimes the government intervenes with the market system to block a balance between the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied. So that means, right, that they set a price above equilibrium or they set a price below equilibrium. So examples of that, the government may allow a certain amount of imported steel to enter the economy. This cuts down on supply and thus results in a higher price, right? Putting a quota on that. The government may buy grain products. This increases demand and thus results in a higher price. The government may set rent controls to keep apartment rents below the market level. The government may set minimum wages to keep the wages higher than they might normally be. And we have examples of each of these. So let me give you an example of each of these as it's related to what has happened. So first, if we take a look at number one, and I've mentioned this before, one of the first things, that's not very good. One of the first things that Trump did when he was president was he put a tariff on imported steel. So what that does, right, what that does is, let's say that steel is coming from China at, we'll just make it a very simple dollar a pound, right? I'm sure that's not the price. U.S. steel, right, because we have unions and we have minimum wage, right, maybe cost $3 a pound. Well, if you're building a skyscraper, you're building some sort of building, right, that takes a lot of input, you would go with the one that's $1 a pound. So if you were to look at this in a market sense, right, price, quantity, supply, demand, Trump and his administration did it based off of the demand side. They didn't do it from the supply side. They did it from the demand side, right? Demand for Chinese steel basically decreased because what Trump and his administration did was, we're going to make this 50 cents a pound more expensive than U.S. steel. So now what are you going to buy? Right? And that's when we got into the trade war with China. When that happens, right, the demand for Chinese steel becomes less, U.S. steel becomes more preferred because it's lower in price or equal in price. So there are a number of different ways the government can do this. Another example, if you look at number 2, right? If you look at number 2, the government may buy grain products. This increases demand and thus results in a higher price. Why would the government buy grain? Right? Well, back in the early 2000s, the second President Bush bought a bunch of extra grain from farmers in the Midwest and shipped it to Africa because there was a famine. People were starving to death. So as a humanitarian cause, right, he buys this extra grain that would have gone to waste that would have driven the price down because the supply would have been too much for our market. Saves people's lives and helps, right, farmers in the Midwest. So the government can go through and do these things on a regular basis. Number three, the government may set rent controls to keep apartment rents below market level. A couple of years ago, the county of San Luis Obispo lost a court case that they weren't offering enough affordable housing in their county. They were instructed to provide, I think, 10,500 units by 2024. They're ahead of schedule on that, but affordable housing, there's a cap. Affordable housing, there's a cap. So what they do is they set a price ceiling, right, that is below equilibrium. Keeps the prices artificially low. And then on number four, if you want a current, right, minimum wage. Minimum wage is set by the government. It's not set by the market. In this case, what it does is set prices artificially high, right? You have supply, you have demand, you have equilibrium. Minimum wage is set above that because you could always find somebody to do work for less, right? There'd be somebody to come and do my job for 10, 15,000 less, right? If they were just getting out of college, what have you. So wages generally are artificially high in terms of what happens. That makes sense? So this is illustrated we know about the downward force of price. We know about the upward force of price, right? So a price floor is a minimum that can be used or charged. That's set above equilibrium. Force of price comes up. Price ceiling is a maximum price, right? So that's the example of affordable housing. This here is an example of minimum wage. And it's the way that our government works together with the economic system to try to make sure that inequities or things that would keep the market out of balance and hurt the economy are dealt with. All right. So go ahead and go to Kahoot.it and we'll review these. All right, in the chat room is the game pen and then Kahoot.it. So during a business crisis or during a housing crisis, which of the following could be used by government for inflation? Inflation is the sustained rise of goods and services, the prices of those. There you go, right? So price ceilings during a time of inflation, price ceiling is a maximum price set below equilibrium that stops the prices from going where they normally would go. If they were normally going to go up, you want a ceiling to stop it from happening. Minimum price of a good or service. Price floor. Price floor is set above equilibrium. It stops the price from going lower. So it is a maximum price. There you go, right? Price ceiling, maximum price. Won't allow it to go any higher. All of the following are disadvantages to rent control except. Gives landlords an incentive to attract new buyers, right? If they can't charge what they normally would charge because of rent control, they're not going to go out looking for more buyers, not when they could rent it for more. When there's excess supply, what do we know is true? If there's excess supply, what do we know is going to be true here? Disequilibrium. And remember, disequilibrium is referencing basically anything that is not where supply and demand are equal. So if you have demand here, the supply here, equilibrium is at this point. Everywhere else is out of equilibrium. It has to be, right? This entire area up here is disequilibrium. This entire area down here is disequilibrium. It has to be from that point. Okay, the force of price always moves towards where? Force of price always moves towards where? Force of price always moves towards equilibrium. Pushing down from above, pushing up from below. That's how you can keep track of the floors and ceilings. So if the force of price is always going, right, towards equilibrium here, if you're going to stop equilibrium, right, if you're going to stop it this way, that has to be a price floor above. And if you're going to stop it from going up, that has to be a price ceiling below. So you can think of it that way in simple terms. A strike of workers or a company would decrease supply and shift the supply curve left. Okay. The equilibrium price would change causing an increase in money. A shortage causes what? What does a shortage cause? Shortage causes an increase in prices, right? Higher demand causes the increase in prices. What does a surplus cost? Surplus causes decrease in prices. All right. An increase in the quantity supplied will move the market supply curve what direction? Okay, move it to the right. So all of you that put up, remember, right, when we're talking about price and quantity. Price is the y-axis. So that is going to be up or down. Quantity is the x-axis. So that is going to be left or right. Right? So they're talking about quantity, it can only be left or right. They're talking about price, it'll be up and down. So just remember your axis, this is your origin, 0, 0. So try to keep that in mind. Okay, a decrease in the quantity supply will move the market supply curve which direction? Left. Left. All right, a decrease in demand will move the market equilibrium which direction? Down, right? A decrease in demand will move the market equilibrium. We're talking about where that meets, where that point meets. And when they talk about demand or supply moving, they're essentially assuming that you know the other, right? If it's demand moving, supply stays the same. With supply moving, demand stays the same. All right, an increase in demand will move the market equilibrium up. Search costs help who to determine if it's worth their time looking for a product. Search costs. Right? Consumers. Consumers are the ones that are looking for a product. Consumers and households buy the products, businesses and firms make them. A price ceiling helps this group the most. So a price ceiling set below equilibrium is going to help what group the most there? Consumers. A price ceiling keeps prices artificially low. That doesn't help businesses, that helps the people buying the product. A price floor helps this group the most. Price floor is set above equilibrium. right? Keeps prices artificially high. That helps producers. Minimum wage is least beneficial to this group. Producers, right? Makes producers pay more in wages than they normally would if the market was allowed to act on its own. What is the cost of rationing? Cost of rationing, prices rise. Right? Cost of rationing, prices rise. If people, right, hang on to things, that is going to lower supply. Lower supply drives up costs. What is the quickest way to solve supply shock? Quickest way to solve supply shock. Right. Quickest way is to raise prices. Rationing is a system for allocating goods and services that does not take what into account? Price of a product. Rationing, right, doesn't take the price of a product into account. It takes the quantity that's going to be available into account. The system that is best helped by the effects of price is which economic system? Our system, right? Free market system. All right, fads can cause a market to experience what? Something becomes very, very popular very quickly. What happens? Yeah, supply shock. There's not enough. There's not enough left. In a free market, if minimum wage is set above the market equilibrium wage rate, what happens? The result will decrease unemployment. The result will decrease unemployment. More incentive for people to work. Price ceiling hurts this group the most. So price ceiling set below equilibrium. Businesses, right? Below equilibrium, it stops prices from rising. Prices don't rise, they don't make as much revenue, not as much revenue, not enough profit. Price floor hurts this group the most. Consumers. Price floor hurts consumers the most because it keeps prices artificially high, making them pay more for whatever good or service that might be. What is the quickest way to resolve problems from a supply shock? Yellow, nobody picked, which is good because that lowers supply. Lowering prices would increase demand, making the shortage even more. And decreasing supply would decrease the amount available, increasing the supply shock. So that's good. Adam Smith would argue that bakers and butchers provide food for what reason? Why do people go into business? Right? Earn a profit. People go into business to earn a profit. Why do prices rise in a market? Why do prices rise in a market? There is excess demand in the market. That would be the only one there that would cause prices to rise. What is an advantage of a price-based system? Prices act as a signal. Prices act as a signal. Driving to different stores to locate a product is an example of right, search costs, right? Search costs for consumers. Consumers are the ones that incur that sort of search cost. How are goods and services distributed in a free market economy? Distributed by prices. Prices act as a signal. Lower the prices, probably more people will buy, and you can see what will happen with demand. When there's excess supply, what happens to the price of the product? Excess demand. Oh, sorry, excess supply. Yeah, I just screwed you. Screwed all of it. Yep. Prices will fall. Excess demand, prices will rise. When there's excess demand, what happens to the price of a product? Prices rise. Excess demand, prices rise. When the actual price in a market is below the equilibrium price, you have what? Price ceiling. Price ceiling, below equilibrium. stop the price from going up. Which of the following is an example of a shortage? Right? Consumers cannot find enough of a particular toy would be an example of a shortage. Okay. So last two things in terms of what we have. One, if you go, sorry. If you go past, the only assignment that you have left is a demand supply case study on airline tickets. We've already kind of talked about this a little bit, but it's an article on Southwest and their model for success. So it hypothesizes, right, that you have gotten married, you're looking to fly to Fiji or Hawaii on your honeymoon, and while looking across the flight, you come across this article in the LA Times. Right, so if you click on that article, it will open up. This tab will let me do it. It'll open up an article. I'll post the link to the article too in there. But it says Southwest began to challenge established major airlines in the 90s. The low-cost carrier has been known for forcing competitors to reduce fares. That industry insiders have dubbed it the Southwest effect. Last week, Southwest launched services from California to Hawaii. Looked this up yesterday. Christmas time, LAX to Honolulu, 4.4 round trip. Right? You look at other airlines, it's about $600 to $700. So airfare among all carriers between those two states, basically those fares fell 17%. Experts say that the average fare will edge back up, right, in the next few weeks. So you're going to answer those questions here and then submit that. The review game for you is available as many times as you want between now and Monday. You can use that link if you're on a non-tablet device, or if you're on a tablet device, put kahoot.it and put in that game pin and you'll be able to play. And then when you're ready, test 5, or excuse me, test 6 is open. And it is the same setup as before. So you'll log into School City. On the left will be the test booklet. On the right will be the answers that you put in. And that's open every day, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. You're able to take that. So again, on the left is the PDF of the test booklet. On the right are the answer choices. All right. Questions or concerns, you can stick around. Have a good weekend. All of those things will show up theories on Monday at 3:15.
Excuse me, Mr. Rath?
Yep, just 1 second.
Would you?
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, I just want to make sure I wasn't marked absent because I had to hop out of class to restart my computer.
No, I saw you come back in.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. Take care.
I have a question.
All right. I hope I have the answer.
Okay, so I think today, I'm pretty sure it's my last day, not my last day. On Monday, I won't be able to attend this class, so because I'm going to be going to Mexico, so I don't know when I'm gonna. No, I know when I'm gonna be back, but I don't think I'm gonna have internet. So I just want to know if the assignments for this week, can I do this week, or do I just wait till I come back, or because I can do them today, and like, yeah, I can turn them in today.
Well, all the assignments from this quarter are open until June 4th. So you can do them ahead of time or you can do them when you come back, whichever you prefer.
Okay, I'll probably do them right now. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Greg.
Yep, I was just typing to go ahead.
What's it called? Can we unlock some assignments so I could get those done?
Well, all the assignments from this quarter are available.
Yeah.
So the assignments from 29 to 33 are still available for full credit.
All right.
Yep. So all of those are still unlocked. You just have to do them and submit them via Canvas, and you can get 100% on them.
Even if I get some answers wrong?
Even if you what?
Even if I
Well,
get answers wrong,
you don't get credit for wrong answers.
that's going to decrease it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you still have to get the answers right, but there's no penalty for turning in 29 through 33 late.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, those are still unlocked. So the supply case study 1, reasons for a change in supply, test 5, the case study we did yesterday, the case study that we just assigned today, are all available for full credit.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
So any assignments prior to that are not available no more?
No, those were locked on the 29th because I had to turn grades in.
All right, thank you.
You bet.